Hello, guys. Welcome to today's coaching call in Elite. Hey, Lars. Hey, Nicholas. So today's topic, I'm going to cover off an interesting question that came up in my public group. So I asked people last week, ask me anything, what's the question that I can help you most out with? And one of the interesting questions, which I'm going to answer today, was related to this concept of using your creative and your copy instead of ad targeting. So the question was like, do we, in fact, I think that the guy said he's seen more success with his ad angles and his creatives more so than his targeting. So then someone else followed up and said, well, I've tried interest targeting for the last year or so. It hasn't worked as well as just going broad. And I think there's an interesting point about this as to where Facebook is right now and kind of where Facebook's going. So first of all, where is Facebook going? iOS 14 is making Facebook adapt and change the way it's kind of the whole ecosphere, if you want to call it, everything within ads manager, everything within its ad targeting, its data collection, everything's changing because of iOS 14 and because of a future world where third-party cookies are restricted and maybe even taken away from browsers. So Facebook's having to really plan ahead of where is the future going and how do we make sure we're future proof. Now, Mark Zuckerberg recently said that he feels that Facebook is going to deliver even more value for its for everyone. So advertisers, investors, etc. And they believe the changes that have been enforced, which Facebook would not want to make if they didn't have a choice, are going to put Facebook in a stronger position. And one of the things about this is, if you look at display advertising has been around since the early 2000s. So that's basically just dropping a banner onto a website, and you could retarget someone, or you could target based on some kind of context. So maybe the category of the website, maybe the actual URL of the website. So there were many ways that you could interrupt someone's web browsing by dropping in an ad to try and get that user into your website or through your funnel. The problem with that was, first of all, the execution. So banners don't really have that much real estate for you to get your core message across. So if you imagine you've got a square banner and you've dropped it into a web page with a static image, you've got very little ability to actually get that message across and get someone into your lander. People then start to use Flash and GIF and video and trying to kind of make that a lot deeper. So get that message across in a different way. But even then, if you imagine someone's browsing a news website or a blog or a celebrity page or something like that, and they see your ad, there's no direct kind of need or connection or anything like to get them to click your ad. So if you imagine you're scrolling through on desktop, you've got your content here, maybe an ad strip here, and maybe an ad banner on the side. That made it difficult because it's just there. It's not really in your face. And one of the reasons why I think Facebook advertising initially started to work so well is because it was closer to TV. So TV advertising worked so well because you'd watch your TV show, an ad would pop up in between your show, right? So they'd have an ad break, you'd have 30 seconds of ads, 2 minutes of ads, whatever it was there. So you kind of had no choice. And obviously some people would go away and make a tea or a coffee and come back. But essentially TV advertising worked amazingly well for the last, whatever, 2-3 decades, and it still continues to work to an extent. However, Facebook, what I believe they kind of introduced and solved was this kind of banner blindness that would come up to get you engaged in something. So that's something, whether it was a TV show for TV advertising or a radio show for radio advertising, Facebook had you hooked on social media and speaking to your friends and being updated with what's going on. So they had you hooked on this stream. What they did, and they first started doing, was to do the same things. You'd have ads on the side and stuff like that. It didn't have the same impact, but now all of a sudden, when you put the ad in the news feed and the ad looked like part of the normal stream of content you're viewing, that's what really helped Facebook to take off. And that changed the game for a lot of the competitors, because FYI, MySpace used to have ads and stuff, but they didn't work as well as Facebook because MySpace wasn't a stream of content. It wasn't engagement. It wasn't done in the way that Facebook were doing it. Granted that Twitter had that kind of thing, but they didn't really figure out the monetization part as Facebook did. Why does that matter right now? That matters because back then, if I go back to 2011, 2012, 2013, we didn't have anywhere near the capability of targeting with Facebook that we do now. So for those of you that have just been doing Facebook for the last 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, even in the last 5 years, if you go back even further, like I started in 2012, I know some people started obviously before that as well. We didn't have that much data and therefore that many targeting options. And I remember when lookalikes were first launched and it was like, what is this thing? How does that even work? How does that make sense? And it was like some magic in the background, and Facebook were doing some stuff with the data, which we couldn't at the time as advertisers figure out how or why, but it works. And that's all that mattered. So we'd run lookalikes, and for some reason, these lookalike audiences were amazingly good. So everyone focused on building up custom audiences, whether it's email or website eventually and things like that. But there was a time where Facebook didn't have all of these targeting options, and it still worked. Now, if you fast forward to 2021, 2022, and Facebook is hit with iOS 14 changes, which means that they're collecting less data, and maybe a cookieless world where third-party cookies are blocked from browsers. Where does that leave us? That leaves us in a position where essentially the data collection part, the analysis part, the modeling part, it has to change. And Facebook are going through that right now. They know what's coming up. The Facebook's engineers are some of the best in the world. The data scientists, the brains behind the products, they're some of the best in the world. So what I believe is happening with Facebook, and what will happen, is the algorithm is going to be using different signals. So first of all, there are some changes that Google are making with Chrome, and some other browsers are also making to anonymize some of the data, but they'll still give you some data, maybe not as much as kind of one-to-one personalized as it was before. But that still allows Facebook to create models. So if Facebook knows that you click this and you did that and you did that, Facebook already has those models. Now, if you take some of the data out, they can do some prediction and still give you data. So as far as kind of, this year or next year goes, I still believe that the path forward is to work with those broad audiences and to work so hard on your creative and your messaging. Because if you see it from the user's point of view, nothing really changes. There's still going to be ads in the newsfeed. There's still going to be ads in story. There's still going to be ads in, the different placements that Facebook has. What's going to change under the hood is that Facebook potentially has less hard data to make those predictions. So less data to know that this person has, bought recently, or they're going to buy, or they're interested in these categories. Back in 2015, when I spoke to the engineers at Facebook, they were explaining to me how the typical database looks within Facebook. So for one individual user, just one user on Facebook, and I felt it was an exaggeration at that point, but they said for one user, there's over 1 million data points collected. 1 million data points. Like that alone is a huge database just for one person. And they could build prediction models based on what that user has done in the past, and then just refine it as they go along. So bear in mind, I don't know how many billions of users Facebook has right now. Facebook has that data. Facebook has all of that profiling, et cetera, regardless of iOS 14, regardless of cookies. That's not going to change. Facebook are not deleting any data. They're not forgetting, their customers or anything like that. So all of that data is still going to be there. And I still think even if, for example, you didn't give Facebook data for a year or two, their targeting engine is still going to be powerful. So for example, I think I've been a user on Facebook since 2007. That's a lot of data. And you think about the millions of rows that I've created of data within Facebook, my connections, my interests, the things I've clicked on, the things I've bought. There's so much Facebook already has. Even if I stop giving Facebook data for the next 12, 24, 36 months, Facebook can still pretty much predict who I am, what I'm about, my interests. For example, if I've never clicked a particular interest in the last whatever years, over 10 years, whatever that is, then chances are I'm probably not going to change that much as well. That they have my age, they can build so many profiles and stuff. So, if you tie that into where Facebook are currently with certain interests being taken away, certain behaviors being taken away. We talk about iOS 14 and the potential impact on your lookalikes. So if if you can't track certain events that Facebook is, being blocked for, or iOS 14 is not passing back, so iOS operating system's not passing back, that will obviously have some impact. So for example, if you want to create a lookalike audience of people that have viewed, 50% of your video, and some of those users are on iOS 14 and you're not getting that view data back, then the quality of your lookalike reduces. However, if you are going for, let's say, a broad audience, women 25 plus, and you're selling something like handbags or makeup or anything like that, guess what? Facebook will still know, first of all, who is 25 years old, who is female generally, and then your demographic, so US, for example. And Facebook still has millions and millions of data points, and they will still have this in a year, 2 years, 3 years' time. Therefore, the work for you is to come up with the ad that's going to work for them in the newsfeed. So, it's not as bad as it was 10 years ago, where we didn't have as much knowledge of how Facebook worked. Facebook didn't have as much data as well, yet the ads still worked. And the ads will still continue working with Facebook. And this is where I think, for me, my big mission right now is to get as many people to understand the power of your marketing message, the power of your thumbnail, your headline copy, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's why I spend so much time on this, because even with my targeting, I don't spend so much time on doing kind of the kind of nth level of interest targeting and layering of interest and things like that. Where possible, I like to keep my audiences simple and big and broad, because when you've got that in place, when audiences are not kind of really, really restricted, and you're not doing, a 1% and a 2% excluding 1% and 3% excluding 2 and 1 and all that kind of stuff, you give Facebook a lot more data to play with. So if I had a choice, I'd use just one single 3% audience or a one single 5% audience, but work on the creative messaging. Let Facebook tell me which users are most interested in my ads via the click-through rate, by the relevant or the quality metrics, via the CPM, am I being punished or not, via the conversion rate on my site, the average order value, whatever that is. That's what I'm looking at as to whether my creative is working. And that's why I put so much emphasis on coming up with the avatar, coming up with the testing of those different angles, putting them through the machine, making sure you're testing them all. I think that that's the thing that's going to save so many advertisers from the pain of losing the data, losing the reporting and things like that. Yes, reporting is a completely different topic. And, can we get as much data back from Facebook as we could before in a year's time, 2 years' time? Probably not. But knowing that your ads are performing, and you can track those metrics in a way that that your ads are performing, and you can take them through that test funnel, that's the thing that's going to keep Facebook operational for you and keep it profitable as well. So with all the kind of changes coming up on the tech and data side, being a good marketer is really what it comes down to. And I know for a lot of you, you've heard me say this so many times, and I will continue saying it every week, every day if I have to. Being really good at advertising and marketing and understanding the whole connection between your product, your audience, your offer, and your funnel. That's as simple as it is. You build that thread all the way through. Does your product solve a problem, create new opportunity? How much do you understand about your avatar, their pain points, their emotional barriers, their benefits, all that kind of stuff? Molding that into essentially the perfect ad, and then pushing that through to your funnel. And the funnel could be a website, could be a call, it could be a lead gen, could be a webinar. Those different pieces, it doesn't matter. That's for you to piece together based on your business. But the fundamentals are going to become even more important. So if I go back to like 2015, so 2015 was the year that I had a massive breakout success. And at that point, we were spending 100K, 200K a day on ads, which even thinking back was quite insane. But back then it was even more insane. We did that with big audiences, but it was always the creative refreshes. Now, bear in mind, at that point, I had a big team of kind of, my performance marketing team was quite big, and I was working client side, and I had 2 sets of creative teams working on rotation to deliver new creative angles and ideas every 2 weeks. So they'd work on rotation. So 1 2 week period, the first team would be working on their creative. The other 2 week period, the other team would be working on their creative. So every week there was a new creative drop. So we could either take existing angles and just create new visuals, or create completely new angles, but we had to keep it refreshed. And that's the thing that really helps us to crack through spending that much so profitably, was having that creative constantly churning out. And it's the same processes that we talk about today of understanding the avatar and being able to test different angles and things like that. If we didn't have that kind of creative cycling and kind of so much focus on the creative, we would have been in the same situation so many people are of, my results are good and then they're bad and then they're good and then they're bad, because I think so many people wait until the creative has fatigued to come up with something new. I always want to be upfront and make sure I've got enough creatives in the pipeline so that when I need it, it's there. And that's what graduation testing is about. For us, that testing process never stops. It's a 24/7 thing. And you've always got that bank of ideas coming in, because, when you go with those audiences that are slightly bigger, that creative messaging for some people, if they see your ad too often, it becomes like wallpaper. You know how it is as an advertiser. You go and you see an interesting ad, but then you see it constantly and it's like, all right, that's not really as interesting as it was before. But the creative refresh, not only does it help you to scale and scale successfully, it's the thing that's going to give you stability despite all the changes that are happening with Facebook as well. And FYI, this is not just even a Facebook problem. Other advertisers are going to go through similar changes. Snapchat, TikTok, etc., that rely on data, that rely on cookies, that rely on app level data. They're all going to be impacted, but the same principles apply. Keep your creative refreshed, work on those angles, rely less and less on the laser targeting and things that we've been so spoiled with over the last few years. And, back in 2015, 16, 17, there was a massive breakout of e-commerce stores and kind of webinars and lead gen where there wasn't really much effort put in because ads just worked and you didn't really have to think too much about your creative and your messaging, because the users were still getting used to Facebook ads and they weren't as defensive as they are now. So I'd say between 2014, 2017, maybe 2018, people were more receptive to seeing ads. So if you now look at 2019, 2020 onwards, people are defensive. When they see an ad, it's a scam, I don't trust it, this, that, the other. People are getting tired of seeing the same thing. If you look at e-com drop shippers, for example, I still see people promoting the same kind of ads and same poor quality copy and 50% off, limited stock, all that kind of stuff. People are not just bored of that, they just don't trust that anymore. And that's where the shift has to come back to being good at marketing. And that's where I always fall back to the people that I've learned from, who many of which are not even around right now, that have been doing marketing 100 years ago, 50 years ago, because that still works. And that's the big thing that I want you guys to take away from this, is make sure when you are planning ahead, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months time, you're building your processes, whether you're on the agency side, whether you're on the in-house side, is making sure that you're fully equipped for coming up with those creative angles and having that creative process, whether you're outsourcing it, whether you've got that inside, making sure you have that as priority. For me, that's the most important thing, beyond being technically good at Facebook, beyond being able to kind of understand the data, the targeting and things like that, making sure you've got your angles in place and you've got that testing process and you've got that kind of built into your day-to-day, and doing it now before these situations start to escalate. So we're still kind of getting our heads around conversion API. We're still getting our heads around what's happening with iOS 14 and who knows what happens with iOS 15, etc. We're going to have a situation in 2022 where the browser cookie is going to be potentially taken away for third parties. That affects your tracking as well. And all these things are distractions as much as anything else. And I see so many people stressing out about, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? There are some basics, iOS 14, get your conversion, the order of priority in place, verify your domain and things like that. But really, I feel, and this is the big thing, the big message for you, is work on your creative, work on your marketing and your advertising. Everything else just generally works. And it's so much easier to think of it that way, because you're not reacting to what's happening with your advertising platform, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or anything else. You're always looking forward to how you need to work with your potential prospect. When you focus heavily on that, the other part just works. And the reason I also say that is because we've had people through our training program who are not very technically good at Facebook. They don't set up exclusions properly. The campaigns are a mess. You know, I look into the ad account, I'm like, I don't know how you're successful, but you are. Yet they are successful. They're growing the businesses to 7 figures because on the marketing side, they fully understand their prospect, their funnel's good, their messages are really on point. And to an extent, they don't know how they've got success. I know because they've focused so heavily on their prospects and marketing, they don't really know how to run ads. And I would argue that I'd rather be in that position where I really, really understand my prospect, I've got a good funnel and I can convert, than stressing out about the technicalities of Facebook. And I think that's something where, especially for you guys, you know, listening in, and you know, majority of you will be running Facebook ads, but you're also doing other platforms as well. Move away from the left brain, move away from that kind of platform centric focus of trying to hack and predict and, you know, whatever. Move towards the more of the right brain, thinking about your avatar, thinking about the problem, the solution, the creativity, the landing page, the funnel and things like that. That's the thing that served me well for so many years. And I'm hoping that's the thing that serves you well for many years to come as well. Lars says, speaking of the section of the 8 events, could you check in whether you need value optimization to see the conversion value in reporting in the future? So this one's actually in the air at the moment. As far as I'm concerned, you don't need to have the value optimization set in your order of 8 conversion points in order to see the actual conversion value. What you do need it for is ROAS-based optimization. Now, I haven't heard an official word from Facebook, so I can't answer that 100% and say yes or no. All I can answer is based on what I know so far from Facebook. And if you don't use value optimization in your priority of 8, so just as an FYI for anyone else, you have 8 conversion events that you can prioritize, you know, in relation to iOS 14. If you use value optimization, it takes up 4 of those slots. So you've only got 4 left. For ecom, I think that's actually okay, because mostly you want purchase, you probably want initiate checkout, add to cart, and view content. They're kind of the 4 main ones, and then you can add value optimization on top. For lead gen, you know, you might have registration, lead, maybe a few custom events, and maybe you don't need value optimization. But if you use value optimization, you lose 4 of those slots. It does allow you to do ROAS-based optimization at the ad set level. So the question is, can I also see my conversion value? So as far as I'm concerned, you can without having to lose those 4 slots as well. Lars says, awesome, focusing more on creative at the moment, planning to move into more of a creative agency. This is a really good point. This has been on my mind for the agency for the last 2 years. So we outsource a lot of our creative. I want to own that, first of all. So we're looking at how we either buy up a small design house and absorb that into our agency, or set up a new department. But I do feel that that's going to be a massive, not going to be, it's a massive differentiator and a massive advantage for it. And it doesn't matter if you're agency side or you're just running your own ads for your own brand. Having creative in-house is a massive, massive advantage, because it's not just being able to come up with those ideas, it's being able to layer on the knowledge. So when you've got your in-house team, and every day, every week, they're communicating with the media buyers and they're learning and they're learning and learning, all of a sudden something happens and a switch goes. That creative team now are on the front foot. So I remember back in 2015 when I had this, so I had my media buyers, my performance marketers on one side, I had my creative team on the other. Every 2 weeks we'd review every week or every 2 weeks, can't remember, but we'd review what's happened in terms of results. And then we'd also plan forward on what we're actually going to bring forward for the test. We ran that for probably about 4 to 5 weeks. And I could see the creative team were not quite there with the numbers and stuff like that. But then as they start to see what was working, as they start to see the results, and we say, right, so this creative campaign, the ROAS was 3.5, really, really profitable. This one was 1.1, we had to kind of kill it. Then that started to switch and they got really excited, because the creative people are not generally numbers people. But if you say this one was really profitable and it worked really well, this one wasn't, they're learning, they're taking that knowledge on. Now, when you work with an external agency and stuff, you can't, you know, for example, we work with NLC, and you can't have that one-to-one relationship with your designer, because it's a pool of designers. And that's a frustrating part for me, being able to own that in-house and have your creative team take an interest as we had before. That makes a huge difference, so that you can have that conversation and that team come forward and they're talking to you about, hey, you told me last week that that creative was working really well. We come up with these angles. What do you think? And you give them the tools to go and look at competitors, to use different mobile apps. And by the way, I did hire a pretty good videographer and designer a few years ago, but he was using, I think, archaic desktop applications, and he needed a high-powered desktop and stuff. I've actually created a lot of creative myself for my own products. So for example, if anyone saw e-commerce fast track end of 2020 and some other things, I actually do my own production. So I'll have a camera, I'll stage it and things like that. Then on my mobile, I'll do the post editing. And within 2-3 hours, I can create quite a good quality video. It doesn't need to have high production costs. It doesn't have to have a big studio and stuff like that. And that's something which I favor a lot more, because if you're working with an external agency and they're having to brief and come up with things. We had this back in 2015. We had something set up internally with some props and stuff, but I just said, just go and record stuff and come back. Sometimes that mobile recording, yes, it's not as high quality, just works better. And that's something which is about just continually testing, continually falling forward, and avoiding the trap that some creative people come to, which is, I want to get this perfect. Because that perfect thing does not work with social media marketing, Facebook advertising. You can't wait, an extra few days or a few weeks just to get it perfect. You just want a constant rollout of ideas. You might have 50 assets, maybe only 20 are usable, maybe even only 10 are usable. It doesn't matter, but we'll use the ones that we think will work. And it's a collaboration between the media buying team or person and the creatives. But ultimately, the media buyer decides what they're going to use. The creative can come up with all these ideas. The media buyer is the person that has the closest feel. But over time, your creative person can start to get closer to your avatar as well, and understand who they are and kind of what they're motivated by as well. Lars says, I'm seeing it with Welling, Chamber, and all the agencies that focus on creative. So Welling Media and Chamber are two great examples. They wouldn't necessarily class themselves as a Facebook advertising agency or a performance marketing agency. They pitch themselves as a creative agency. So both Welling and Chamber, good friends of mine, and we've talked about different levels of Facebook advertising. They don't focus on how to be the best at Facebook advertising. Like they are two super good examples of agencies that focus heavily on being really good at creative. There's another guy in Germany, a guy called Addis Pez as well, who you might know as well. And we've had the similar conversation. He took the same route. He's actually a designer from his background. And we talked about Facebook and kind of how media buying and that plays a part. And he's absolutely on point as well, just like these guys. They see themselves as a creative marketing agency. The delivery side is delivery. Facebook, Snap, whatever. That's like the secondary thing. And that's where I would see my agency going as well, that we do that anyway. We focus so heavily on creative and marketing and advertising, yet the position that people see currently right now for our agency is that we're a Facebook ads agency. We do a lot more than that, but also our base is not just Facebook. We work on creative and marketing. And I think that has a bigger impact than just saying, hey, we do Facebook ads. From a client's point of view, when they see, so here's the thing, like if you had a website and you got ROAS screenshots and Shopify screenshots and stuff like that, there'll be a certain percentage of clients that will be interested in seeing that. But now when you show client creatives and marketing campaigns and stuff like that, that's going to appeal even more. So here's an amazing case study where, we create this marketing campaign, we ran these ads, here's the landing page and stuff like that. That's going to appeal a lot more to brands thinking about the long term and maybe better clients than the ones where you show the screenshot and say, this is how we scaled it up. We did 3x this, and we had multiple campaigns, and we did that. That's a different pitch. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. All I'm saying is, for me, and where I believe we need to go as an agency, and where I would encourage others to look at, is make creative front and center, because that's the differentiator when it comes to Facebook. Like, how far do you take it in terms of being the best Facebook ads marketer on the planet? Some people have said, look, I'm really good at Facebook ads and whatever. I don't think I'm that good at Facebook ads. There are many times where I don't know the technicalities of some of the things that people have suggested, and I'll go and have to Google it myself. I go into the developer part of Facebook, maybe try to understand things a bit better. But I really do feel when it comes to marketing and advertising, I am one of the best because I've been doing this for 15 years and I really, really understand the core concepts of marketing. I believe anyone can do that. It's not a superpower, it's just a learned experience as well. So like it's a decision between, do you want to be the rocket scientist that helps to get the rocket on the moon, or do you want to be the astronaut that gets all the accolades? That, you know, that's up to you. Do you want to be the technical media buyer, or do you want to be the creative marketing person that's actually going to land these campaigns and get results as well? Lars, totally feel that. It's a lot easier to own it. I'm seeing that in brands where I'm working with my in-house designer. Yeah, absolutely. So that's really what I wanted to get across for today, and make sure that you are really planning that in. So I'm just looking at the names here. I think you're all running agencies. Yeah, so I think maybe some in-house as well. It doesn't matter if you're in-house or agency, creative has to be part of your planning process. It doesn't mean you have to have an internal person or team initially. You can go on to Upwork, you can go on to even Fiverr and get some good creatives going. But when you're getting serious about growth, owning that creative in-house and having that person full-time, or the people full-time working with you and for you, that makes a huge difference. I spoke to another agency a few months ago about how they had set up a team in South Africa. So for example, you know, when you think about building your creative teams up, there are places around the world that have super talented designers that are also lower cost based than doing it in, let's say, US or UK or anything like that. So he'd set up a creative team in South Africa. So his cost was super low, but the quality of what those guys were producing were as good as anyone would do in the UK or US and things like that. There's another company I spoke to, they set up a design house in Brazil, and that was working amazingly well for them. So there's lots of different ways that you can play this out, just to balance your ability to build a creative function and do it cost efficiently as well. Obviously, if you've got an office, then you'll need to hire locally and bring people in. But there's so many ways to solve this creative problem as well. Cool. Let me just see if there's anything else. So I think that's done for today. So we'll get the replay posted up. But I would encourage you for the next kind of 2 to 4 weeks to really think about what you need to do to get your creative game up a few levels, and start posting those questions in the group, bring it to the masterminds. So we got the call in 2 days time, the war room. Really start working on your creative game, because I think that's going to be a massive, massive differentiator for you this year and going forward as well. Lars, difference between Welling and NLC Constant Creative is that the first two are also running your ads, right? Last two only. Yeah, so Welling and Chamber, they both have media buyers, so they run the ads as well. They also have full video production and photography production. So if you're an e-commerce company, you can send your products and creatives to Welling or Chamber. They'll shoot it up and send it back. They'll bring in models and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they also run your ads as well. NLC is just a design house, and I believe so is Constant Creative, although Constant is connected to Nick Shackelford. He has his own agency as well, so I'm sure they have some kind of hybrid model there as well. But I think that's, you know, having that in-house. So here's another thing. If you're serious about building your creative in-house, what we're actually working on is to do a hybrid of, yes, we can run your ads and do your creatives. Also, if you want your ads alone, if you just want us to come up with creative, we can do that as well. Because what's the difference between getting creative from our agency, SM Commerce, versus NLC? Well, we're in the trenches every single day. So we understand marketing and creative and things like that. So, you know, I'm sharing some confidential information, but it's a public group anyway. If and when we go down that creative route, yes, I want to own creative in-house, but there'll also be a side route to come and work to come and source the creative separately from the media buying. Because, you know, one of the problems I found as well prior to starting the agency was, even when I had in-house teams, if I wanted to source some really, really good social media based content, come up with marketing campaigns, and what I'm talking about is not, you know, you want a banner and we'll create a banner for you. It's, you want to help your business grow, and you want angles, you want marketing campaigns and things like that. That in itself as a service, I think is hugely valuable. So imagine, in 6 months time, there's a business out there that we're advertising to, and we say, hey, if you're stuck on creatives and angles and you want a constant stream every 2 weeks of new ideas or every 4 weeks, we can do that for you. So all we're doing is plugging in the BPM method. So we understand their avatar, their core four, we understand ads and the different formats and stuff like that. For us, therefore, to create an operational machine that's churning out new angles and new creatives for that given client without even worrying about their media buying, because, for example, they've got an in-house team, or maybe they've got an external media buying house, but they're not very good at creative. We can plug that gap. And I think that's something for you guys to just think about, especially that are running agency, that you can have a side income to solve that, because it is a big problem. I've been there. I know it exists for especially in-house teams that don't have good creative teams. And there's a difference between coming up with marketing campaigns and coming up with creative. So NLC are very good at coming up with creatives, but you need to feed them and say, right, I want this banner, I want this kind of video, I want this. That I don't believe either Constant Creative or NLC would be able to take a loose brief that says, here's our product, here's what's worked, we need a new marketing campaign. That's a whole different ball game, but I think that's easy to solve using the BPM method and then plugging in a design process onto the back of that and just churning out some new ideas for copy and creative as well, which I think would be really quite powerful as well. Cool. So Lars, yeah, keep us up to date. I'd love to see how you progress with that and anything we can help you with on that as well. So that's it for today. Hopefully that was useful. Make sure you join us on Wednesday for the War Room, where we'll be doing a roundtable, sharing wins and challenges for the month as well. And apart from that, have a great week, and we'll see you again soon.